Hello everyone, back tuning into today's first video. We're going to have a look at the long-range seasonal models. For today's first video, you get 13 long-range models together and see what they're all showing for the spring of 2019 for only the second and final time this season. So we've only done one seasonal model roundup. That was back in January for the spring. This is the second one. We're short on spring updates this year due to the shutdown in America. The spring forecast, the spring forecast will be released on the 3rd of January. We're hoping to release on the 3rd of January anyway. So pretty important to update. This going to get 13 of these long-range models together, and we're going to see what they are all showing for the spring of 2019. Tomorrow we'll have the fourth and final spring analogs update. As I say, it's all ahead of the spring forecast released a week tomorrow on the 3rd of March. Just say that coming up later on today, we're going to have the weekend forecast, of course. So as always on a Saturday, we've got your weekend look ahead, and we'll also have a week 10-day video update as well. This is going to be quite a long video for season one roundup, so you can't watch it all in one go. Don't worry, it will be placed on the spring updates and forecast page with a written summary, just going over everything we talk about in the video, and that'll be placed on that page sometime this evening. Right, so busy day coming up on the website. I think better get on with the second spring 2019 season model roundup. So I'm going to start off with the JMA. These are the 500 millibar height anomalies from the JMA for spring 2019. So we've already done an update for the JMA, breaking it down month by month. Haven't got time to do that for this update. For the anomaly overall for the spring of 2019, JMA is placing a trough of below average heights over the top of the UK with a bit of a blocking signal going up to the north. That is disguising a lot of intra-month variation, however. Temperature anomalies for the spring of 2019 are coming out a little bit milder than average through most parts of the country, while precipitation anomalies are coming out above average. So a rather unsettled, quite wet spring being forecast here, but temperatures holding up reasonably well. However, it does have a very strong blocking signal in March, which we're very dubious about, the northern blocking that the JMA is going for in March, a JMA seasonal model. Very dubious about it. But overall, for the spring overall, it looks rather mild but quite unsettled. Over to Brazil next. These are the 500 millibar height anomalies from the Brazilian model for the, excuse me again, of the spring of 2019. So this always does things a little bit different. Blue is extrapolating to above average heights, high pressure. Yellow, orange, red, extrapolating to below average heights, low pressure. It looks like the Brazilian model has a ridge through the central part of the Atlantic, and then it's extending it out to the east of us through the spring, with presumably, it doesn't really look like an area below average heights, but presumably we've got some sort of area of low pressure stored there in the middle of the Atlantic. If so, the jet stream would be doing something a little bit like that. So we're placed on the mild side of the jet, and we're close to a ridge of high pressure sitting to our east. This leaves us with a milder than average spring. Temperature anomalies for spring 2019 are being forecast to be above average by the Brazilian model, while precipitation anomalies are coming out just very close to average. So not a particularly strong signal for precipitation, but a fairly mild spring being forecast. This is CanSIP, so this is the Canadian model going north from Brazil to Canada, and this is from tropicaltidbits.com. So this is mean sea level pressure anomalies from CanSIPs for the spring of 2019. And it's going for quite a strong blocking signal, actually, to our north. Quite a lot of above average heights are sitting to our north during this spring, with below average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. So seemingly there'll be a southerly tracking jet stream going down there, and possibly we're bringing in easterly winds. Now, of course, it's a transitional season, so in March easterly winds are going to be cold, but by May easterly winds can be relatively they can be relatively mild, relatively warm, with easterly winds in May. But it's quite a strong blocking signal from CanSIPs for the spring. Temperature anomalies are being forecast to be milder than average from CanSIPs. And the precipitation anomaly, once it updates, so we're just going to get that up for you right now. The precipitation anomaly is looking like that. It's coming out drier than average, so a relatively mild and dry spring being forecast by CANSIPS, but with a bit of a northern blocking signal. Let's get rid of that. And we'll go over to the next page. It looks like all these are going to start refreshing. So what I'm going to do, once we've got past this one, is I'm going to pause the video and just go through all of the tabs. I think it's CANSIPS with its ads upsets the tabs. So I'll probably have to pause the video in a moment, but we'll just get you through the IRI, which of course is the International Research Institute for Climate and Society. These are probability maps, so we're going to deal with temperature probability first of all, and we want to close in a little bit on Europe, so there we go. And it looks as though the probability for temperatures this spring for 2019 are coming out generally close to average, so it's not really seeing any high probability either way. Neither a cold spring or a warm spring is being forecast from IRI this month. They're just forecasting the probability to be very, very close to average. Let's flip over to precipitation, and again that's being forecast to be very close to average as well. So a relatively quiet spring, I would assume, very close to average with temperature and precipitation during this spring. From the IRI. I'm going to pause the video there. I'm going to go through the tabs and get them to refresh, so we're not having to refresh every time we click onto a new tab. And I'll be back very, very shortly. We'll go through the rest of the long-range season model. So I'll see you in around 2 seconds' time. Alright, we're back and we're ready to go through the rest of the second and final spring 2019 seasonal model roundup. So we've done several long-range models so far. I had to pause the video because the tabs were starting to refresh, I think due to one of the websites that has quite a few ads on it, upsetting the rest of the tabs. So I've gone through all the tabs. Hopefully they won't be refreshing anymore as we get through into the second half of the video. Up to this point, the general theme has probably been a fairly mild spring, and looking quite settled as well. I'm going to carry on now with Patal Peng's, excuse me, again, we're going to carry on with Patal Peng's analogues, and this is a 200 millibar height anomaly from Patal Peng. Patal is working within the umbrella of NOAA, of course. So this is an actual model output. This is an analog space forecast. Patal is looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies across the world in any given month. In this particular instance, looking at those sea surface temperature anomalies in January, and then he's comparing back to other years with sea surface temperature anomalies that were similar, and then creating an analog space weather forecast going forward. This is 200 millibar height anomaly from Patal Peng for the spring of 2019, and an area of above average heights is being placed through the UK and the North Atlantic. So it's an anticyclonic scene for this spring. Temperature anomalies with Patal Peng's analogues of the spring of 2019 are being forecast to be above average. A milder than average spring is being predicted, and also a drier than average spring as well. Precipitation anomalies with Patal Peng's analogues are drier than average. CFS V2, 700 millibar height anomaly for the spring of 2019 looks like that. So we've got relatively Atlantic looking scenery, below average heights around Greenland, Iceland, above average heights through the middle of the Atlantic. This is bringing in a westerly flow across the country, so it's pretty unsettled spring being forecast there. Very typical, I suppose, of what you'd expect in a normal sort of spring. In the UK, across Northern Europe, you would expect rather Atlantic-driven weather. That's what CFS V2 is showing. Temperature anomalies of the spring of 2019 with a CFS mild and average through northern parts of Europe, around average really through most parts of Western Europe, not particularly mild or cold either way. Precipitation anomalies for the spring of 2019 with CFS-V2 just very close to average. So it's all looking very, very average here with the CFS. Basically, it's Atlantic driven, which is typical, I suppose, for spring. And temperature and precipitation anomalies are not too far from average either. ECMWF, being sea level pressure anomaly for the spring of 2019, is looking like this. So it has an area of above average height sitting just out to the west of the country, which would be bringing in a bit of a west-northwesterly wind, so not overly warm spring. But with high pressure sitting to our west, not all that unsettled either. We are blocking off the Atlantic to some degree, so relatively dry, but not particularly warm spring would be expected. Temperature anomalies with the ECMWF in the spring of 2019, very close to or a little bit milder than average. It's a recurring theme across many of these models for this update. And precipitation anomalies close to average. Notice it is drier than average in the Atlantic out to our west. I would expect a relatively dry spring would be likely with high pressure sitting just to our west. Meteo France looks rather different for the mean sea level pressure anomaly for the spring of 2019. This time it has the area of high pressure over Scandinavia, so you'd expect to be bringing in more of an easterly wind, maybe even a southeasterly wind through the spring. Temperature anomalies are warmer than average spring being forecast with Meteo France, not just for UK, but for many parts of Europe as well. Quite a warm spring being forecast there. And the precipitation anomaly is again very close to average, no real signal with Meteo France. All of this coming from Copernicus, of course. The DWD, the German model, is looking like that. So again, different again, below average heights with mean sea level pressure anomaly for spring 2019 to our south. A little bit of a blocking signal up to the north. You expect the jet stream to be going through down there, and winds possibly coming in from an easterly or maybe more of a northeasterly direction with the DWD. Temperature anomalies are rather milder than average for the UK and much of Northern Europe as well. Precipitation anomalies are a bit drier than average to our north, close to or maybe a little bit wetter than average actually down to our south. Not a big deviation, very close to average with precipitation anomalies this spring. And then the CMCC, which is the Mediterranean model, of course, this one does have quite a strong northern blocking signal to our north. It has below average heights to the south. So again, expect the jet stream to be down there. You'd expect us to be pulling in quite a lot of easterly winds this spring. If that came off, that means sea level pressure anomaly came off. It's another milder than average model for the temperature anomaly. Most parts, let's get rid of that, most parts of the UK and much of Central Northern Europe coming out milder than average during this spring. Precipitation anomalies, maybe a little bit more unsettled, especially so for the southern part of England and Wales. So a bit wetter than average there. You notice it is quite dry up to our north. JAMSTEC temperature anomaly for the spring of 2019, rather cold and average. This is the first model that we've seen that's coming out with below average temperature anomalies for this spring. So rather cooler or colder than average with JAMSTEC, although this model is a little bit predisposed to go colder, so wouldn't necessarily take that overly seriously, not without other model support anyway. And a relatively dry spring as well, so quite a cool spring but also relatively dry with JAMSTEC. We can't see the pressure pattern that's causing that, of course. Then we've got our very own UK Met Office GLOW-C5, so this is the mean sea level pressure anomaly for the spring of 2019 with the UK Met model, placing an area of high pressure really over the UK and many sort of central southern parts of Europe. Low pressure is out here, but jet stream would be going up there. So you would have thought a relatively dry but also relatively mild, maybe even quite warm spring would be likely with that. Temperature anomalies, a little bit milder than average. It is a recurring theme, other than JAMSTEC, very much a recurring theme now with this update to have above average temperature anomalies. Precipitation anomalies, probably not too far from average, although you wouldn't say it's overly dry, maybe a bit surprisingly wet actually, given the high pressure signal that we've got there across western and central parts of Europe. So quite an unsettled spring, but fairly mild. And then finally, we've got the Beijing Climate Centre. Got through these very quickly, didn't we? We've got the Beijing Climate Centre last. I do rate the Beijing Climate Centre quite highly when you get to the final update before the season. So that's why I wanted to hold this one back to the end and go just for a little bit more data with this one. So this is a 200 millibar height anomaly for the spring of 2019 from the Beijing Climate Centre. It has a bit of a blocking feature actually up to the north. It is going for some northern blocking to be to our north, and possibly an area of below average heights underneath it through western and maybe even some central parts of Europe. The temperature anomaly is coming out close to or maybe slightly milder than average. So it's not going for a particularly cold spring, but it's not going for a particularly warm spring either. Just quite close to average with temperature anomalies, but a very dry spring, another dry season is being forecast here by the Beijing Climate Centre, going for drier than average precipitation anomalies. So if we just break this down a little bit on a month-by-month basis. So this is the 500 millibar height anomaly for March. Seeing quite a blocking signal in March with above average heights around Greenland and Iceland. Below average heights are to our south. This could be pulling in some quite cold air from a north or northeasterly direction. Maybe some cold potential in March. April looks like that, with a ridge extending through the UK from the Atlantic, area of above average heights extending through the UK from the Atlantic into central parts of Europe. The jet stream is up there, so that could be quite a warm and dry April. Really quite a warm and dry signal for April indeed. But then look what it does in May. In May, the 500 millibar height anomaly has, again, blocking up towards Green, but this time a much deeper trough is centred over the UK across central parts of Europe. So that would be a cold and unsettled May. We'd be pulling in the wind from the north, but with that trough, it is a deep trough that's centred over the UK and Central Europe, you would expect very unsettled conditions as well. So maybe, I mean, it looks like March and April are relatively dry months. March quite chilly perhaps, April quite warm, but then it looks like we flip to something a lot colder and wetter as we get through into May. So it's a mixed bag. I think overall these models have trended onto the milder side for this spring. You'll remember the first update that we did in January, we had a bit of a split between the model output. Quite a few of them were suggesting a westerly spring, quite an unsettled westerly spring. The rest of them were suggesting quite a cold block spring, northern blocking type pattern for the spring. Most models have backed away from that northern blocking pattern for this spring, and they just want to have quite a dry, mild, and fairly anticyclonic looking signal for the spring. The Beijing Climate Centre is a little bit more interesting. It's blocked in March, it's blocked in May. Particularly May looks like quite a cold and wet month to me. But April in between could be quite summer-like with a big ridge and the jet stream to our north. So a really nice April before it all goes horribly wrong in May. Right, so that's your final Spring 2019 season model roundup. We will consider these long-range models when we come to issue the GazWeathers.com Spring 2019 forecast a week tomorrow on Sunday the 3rd of May. Before that, we've got another Analogues update to do for the spring. Matt will be with you tomorrow. So our final batch of Spring 2019 Analogues will be with you then. Also tomorrow, having GazWeathers study roundup as well. Come back later on today for weekend forecast and also your week to 10-day video update. This video will be placed on the Spring updates and forecast page later on with a written summary, just going over everything that we talk about in the video. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.